They say the person you love most is the one who knows you best. But what if the man sharing your life was a total stranger? My name is Claire, and my life didn't end when my husband died. It ended when I found out who he really was. It was a Tuesday, exactly 7 days after the funeral. The house was too big, too quiet. I sat in our living room, the cold tea on the table, a perfect reflection of my soul. Every time the floorboards creaked, I hoped it was Paul, walking through the door. I was 32, a woman who believed in fairy tales. I had spent 5 years as Paul's wife. He was my rock, my protector. People in our circle envied us. We were the perfect couple. But perfection is often just a very well-painted mask. I closed my eyes and remembered our wedding day. The smell of fresh lilies, the sun hitting Paul's face as he promised to love me until his last breath. He kept that promise. He loved me until he died. But he forgot to mention he was loving someone else at the same time. I walked into his home office. It still smelled of his expensive sandalwood cologne and old books. I hadn't touched anything since the police came, but today the silence of the room was screaming at me to look closer. I began organizing his papers. Paul was always so careful, but as I emptied the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk, I felt something strange. The drawer was shallower than it should be. I pushed against the back panel and, with a soft, haunting click, it popped open. Hidden in that secret space was a silver box tied with a faded blue ribbon. My breath caught in my throat. I had never seen this box in 5 years. It felt cold in my hands, like a piece of ice. I searched for the key. I found it tucked inside a hidden pocket of his leather wallet, behind a photo of us. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the key twice. The sound of it hitting the hardwood floor felt like a heartbeat. I opened the lid. Inside were dozens of letters, neatly stacked. The handwriting was elegant and completely unfamiliar. I pulled out the one on top, dated only 2 weeks before the accident. Dearest Paul, the house feels empty without your smile. I read on, my heart thudding painfully. The roses you planted are finally blooming. Little Leo asks about you every morning. Please come back to us soon. Love, Elena. Us? I whispered. My world didn't just crack, it disintegrated. I spent the next 3 hours on the floor, surrounded by his secrets. I found receipts for jewelry I never wore. I found flight stubs for cities he told me he never visited. He told me he was in London. The paper said Paris. I logged into his private laptop. I found a separate bank account he had hidden for years. Every Friday, $1,000 was withdrawn. He wasn't just cheating, he was funding an entire second life. I was living in a mansion built on shadows. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the sun crawl over the horizon, feeling like a ghost in my own kitchen. I had an address from the envelopes, a small town 3 hours away. I grabbed my coat and Paul's keys. I needed to see the face of the woman who stole my husband. The drive was long and lonely. Every mile felt like a heavy stone on my chest. I looked at the passenger seat, half expecting to see Paul there, laughing, but there was only the silver box, sitting like a silent witness to my misery. I found the house, a small white cottage with a picket fence and pink roses, exactly like the letter described. It looked so peaceful. Our apartment in the city was a showpiece. This place was a sanctuary. I stood at the gate for what felt like an hour. The wind was biting, but I was numb. I realized that if I knocked on this door, the Paul I loved would officially be dead forever. I reached out and knocked. 3 times. The door creaked open. A woman stood there with soft, tired eyes. She was wearing an old, oversized blue sweater. Oh, my heart stopped. It was Paul's sweater, the one he told me he had lost at the gym a year ago. She looked at me, and her eyes went wide. She didn't have to ask who I was. She saw the silver box in my hands. The silence between us was heavy. "You're Claire," she whispered, her voice fragile. Before I could answer, a small boy ran to the door. "Mommy, is Daddy back?" He had Paul's messy brown hair and those same curious eyes. It was a physical blow to my chest. He wasn't just a husband who cheated, he was a father. Elena stepped back, her hand trembling. "Please," she said, "come in." I walked into the house, the smell of cinnamon and baked bread filling my senses. It was a warm smell, a family smell I never had in my own cold, perfect home. We sat across from each other in her small, messy kitchen. She poured me tea, her hands shaking as much as mine. We were 2 women who had loved the same ghost. The silence was louder than any scream. "How long?" I finally asked. Elena looked down at her wedding ring, a simple gold band. 6 years, she whispered. 6 years. They had started their life before Paul and I even met. I wasn't the first wife. I was the second choice. Elena began to talk. To her, Paul was a struggling freelance photographer. He told her he couldn't marry her officially because of legal issues. He played the part of a hard-working father perfectly while living like a king with me. I thought of all the business trips and late nights at the office. He was buying my silence with diamonds while buying her love with a fake struggle. Every moment he spent with me was a moment stolen from them, and every moment with them was a lie to me. Elena brought over a photo album. I turned the pages, and my stomach turned with them. Paul at a local park, Paul at the boy's birthday, Paul in a cheap Santa suit. He looked truly happy, a kind of happiness I had never seen in our house. I reached the last page, a hospital room. Paul was holding a newborn baby girl. "Where is she?" I asked. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "She didn't make it, Claire." Shaky inhale. I remembered those 3 days. He told me he was at a corporate retreat while he was mourning another life I never knew about. He wasn't just a man with 2 wives. He used our grief to feed his lies. Every time I comforted him for being stressed, he was actually mourning another life. He wasn't a hero. He was a master of shadows. I stood up. I couldn't stay another second. I left the silver box on her table. "Keep it," I told Elena. "The letters were for the man you thought you knew. I don't want his words anymore." We were no longer enemies, but survivors of the same storm. When I got home, I didn't cry. I took every suit, every watch, and every fake memory of Paul into the backyard and lit a match. Calm exhale. As the flames licked the expensive fabric, I felt the coldness in my chest finally start to melt. I am starting over. My name is Claire. I don't have a perfect house or a perfect husband anymore, but for the first time in 5 years, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a lie. I see a woman who is finally, painfully free.